The second major flaw in our society is the lack of appreciation for the sacrifices made by the World War II veterans so that we could have a chance at life today. Looking around at the world today, it doesn't seem like 70 million people died just 75 years ago, which is a very short time in the span of humanity. It's very scary that our society could endure so much death and destruction and in such a short time be so far removed from it that it's not even on the public's consciousness, which makes it all the more likely that it's going to happen again unless we do something and learn from the people who already went through hell so that we don't have to. My generation's biggest problem is whether they have internet connection. The World War II generation's biggest problem at the same age is if they were going to get killed, or worse, they were going to have to see their best friends die right in front of them. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves that we aren't doing more to learn from the guys who went through so much hell so that you and I could be here today and not have to worry about anything but ourselves. It's a pretty sobering thought knowing that there's a very good chance that you won't live past your 18th, 19th, or 20th birthdays. But that's what these World War II veterans had in the back of their minds on a daily basis. These were boys who were willing to give up everything so that we could have a chance at life. They were going to give up all their future dreams, ambitions, goals, their consciousness, their physical body, just for us. And how do we repay them? By completely forgetting what they did it for and who they were? Unfortunately, we live in a world where people will often thank a veteran just for the sake of thanking them because it's a social norm. Very similar to when you go to the grocery store and the clerk asks, "How are you today?" But ask any veteran, those shallow thank yous mean absolutely nothing unless you're willing to sit down and actually hear about the sacrifices that they had to make. People really do not understand how close the world came to ending and how lucky we are even to be alive today. I've met so many sons and daughters of the World War II veterans, they can't even tell me what branch their father was in. Not even the branch. How could you not know the most basic information about your own father or your own grandfather? By the time it gets down to the younger generation, they don't even know that he fought in the war. This is not something that we should just forget and pass off. This is important. These World War II veterans literally saved the world. Wrap your mind around that. The only reason I'm standing here and you're watching this is because of the World War II veterans and what they fought for and what they died for. If it wasn't for all those brave young men who sacrificed their lives, the world would be full of tyranny and oppression. We wouldn't have freedom of speech, of expression. We wouldn't be able to go where we want or believe what we want. Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan were not good societies. They literally slaughtered, bayoneted, and burned babies in ovens. These were societies in which killing was not a big deal. The Nazis literally murdered 11 million people, not having to do with war. The Japanese killed millions of Chinese and Taiwanese and Koreans themselves. They were barbarians. If you weren't Japanese and if you weren't Aryan, you weren't good. Those were the only right races in their mind. They were wrong. And the men who fought for us and who saved the world, they knew that. And we've benefited from their debts. So we better start realizing what they gave us. We need to start acknowledging the freedoms and the liberties that have been given to us through bloodshed and sacrifice by the World War II veterans instead of just taking it for granted. Think about it. The fact that we can even wake up in a country where our house isn't bombed out, or that we can dream of being president, or that we can say whatever we want to anyone without any fear of repercussion, these were all things that were given to us graciously by that generation who had to fight to preserve it so that you and me don't have to worry about anything. We need to learn from them. We need to go talk to them, hang out with them, thank them, and let them know that we acknowledge their sacrifice and we're going to learn from it so that it won't have to happen again. What we need to understand is that these World War II veterans aren't just numbers in history books or blurbs on the History Channel, but they were and are real people just like you and me. They had complicated thoughts and emotions. They went to school, they had a pet dog, they were going steady with some girl, they had a mom and a dad, they liked listening to Tommy Dorsey, and they loved to go to Lover's Lane. You know, these were real people with real goals, ambitions, and dreams whose life was cut short because of the war, and because of their sacrifice, we are able to have our lives in a peaceful world where we can imagine what it's like of what we want to do after we graduate college, or where we want to move after we get married. These World War II veterans weren't given that. They were killed at 17, 18, 19, 20. They were boys. We sent a bunch of boys into war. And if we're going to do that, we need to learn from them. Otherwise, there's no point. The vast majority of the World War II veterans are down in the dumps. They're upset that they had to go through the literal definition of hell on earth, and that no one cares enough to even remember the most basic facts about it. It makes them feel like all those guys who died for nothing. In fact, during my interviews, one of the questions I ask at the end is, what do you want to say to your buddies who didn't make it? 90% of the World War II veterans will say something along the lines of, you didn't deserve to die. I wish you were here. I miss you. They've learned nothing. You died in vain. It was worthless. It was meaningless. And while they're talking to me, I know they're not directing it to me, but rather as the generation that I am a part of. And that makes me feel horrible.
Because here they are, looking at someone who they feel is a part of a generation that completely lacks the comprehension of the immense sacrifices that had to be made for all of us to be alive and carefree today. They feel that the fact that real people had to die in order for us all to be here today does not register and weigh on people's consciousness like it really should. And they are right.
We need to make efforts to understand why some 17-year-old kid would give up his life on an island that he couldn't even point to on a map, or why some 19-year-old boy was willing to go through hell in some town that he couldn't even pronounce halfway across the world from where he grew up. We need to understand why these men, I should say boys, because they were boys, but they turned into men when they went to combat. But these boys, why would they give up all their dreams and ambitions and their life goals and their futures, their entire life, their consciousness, their physical body? Why would they be willing to do that? And I think the answer is that so you and I could have a chance at life in their place. If you think about it, all of us who live past 17, 18, 19, we're living on borrowed time, because there were a whole bunch of young boys out there during World War II that gave up everything, literally everything, so that we could be here today. And I don't think it's too much to ask that if someone's going to give up their entire life, their future, their dreams, their goals, their ambitions, all their thoughts, all their emotions, their consciousness, it's not too much to ask for us to just learn a little bit about why they did that and what were the circumstances. I think they've given so much, it wouldn't be difficult if we started to give a little ourselves.